They had security escort me out of my father's company, grinning like they'd won. Now I own 75.8%. And today I'm walking back into the same boardroom to end them. Now I own 75.8%. And today I'm walking back into the same boardroom to end them. Hey Reddit. Throw away for obvious reasons. This happened 2 years ago. NDA expired. I'm finally allowed to talk. So here's the thing about corporate betrayal. It doesn't come with warning signs. No dramatic music. No slow motion red flags. No one hands you a pamphlet that says, "Hey buddy, everyone you trust is about to gut you like a fish." Just a regular Thursday afternoon, and 8 people you've known your whole life deciding you're disposable. I, 36 male now, was 34 when they threw me out of my father's company, Chief Operating Officer of Morgan Biotech Solutions, a company Dad built from nothing into a billion-dollar operation that fundamentally changed how we diagnose cancer. I grew up in those labs, literally learned to walk between centrifuges. Other kids had swing sets. I had clean rooms and petri dishes. By 32, I'd earned my COO title the hard way. 2 years in R&D, showing up at 6 a.m. and leaving at 10 p.m. until even the PhD researchers who thought I was just the boss's privileged kid stopped complaining. At my promotion ceremony, the board applauded. Ronan, my stepfather. Carla, Dad's Stanford friend who owed him her career. Mitchell, the investor who talked about markets like they were a religion. Warren, the nervous compliance guy. All smiles, all handshakes, all hollow. Dad died on a Tuesday. Heart attack at his desk, working on an immunotherapy protocol that he believed could extend remission periods by up to 40%. The coroner said it was instant. No pain, just gone between one heartbeat and the next. I found him myself, coming in early to review quarterly projections. His coffee was still warm. The funeral was a blur of black suits and hollow condolences. Ronan held my mother's arm, whispering about honoring James's legacy together. Mom didn't cry, not once. I told myself she was being strong for everyone else. Told myself grief hits people differently. Told myself a lot of things that let me sleep at night. 3 weeks. That's how long they waited after we put him in the ground. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. routine agenda, reviewing 3 Guatemalan quetzals numbers, approving the new research budget. I walked in with my laptop and Dad's lucky pen, a Mont Blanc he'd bought himself the day our first patent was approved. I was ready to continue the work we'd started together. Their faces told me everything. Ronan sat at the head of the table, Dad's seat, wearing an expression I'd never seen on him before, like he'd been wearing a mask for years and finally got tired of it. The others wouldn't meet my eyes. Carla kept looking at the door like she was hoping Dad would walk in and fix everything for her. Mitchell smoothed the same page of his notes over and over like he could iron out what was happening. Warren looked sick, pale, sweating. The expression of a man who just realized he'd signed on to something he couldn't wash off. "We need to discuss your future with the company, kiddo," Ronan said, dripping with false sympathy that made my skin crawl. That word kiddo. I was 34 years old and the COO. My future. I'm the CEO now. My future is right here. That's what we need to address. Mitchell shuffled his papers again, talking to the table instead of me. The board has concerns about leadership continuity. Market confidence requires stability right now. Markets don't like uncertainty. You're brilliant. No one disputes that. But succession planning in biotech requires a seasoned hand during the transition. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Sharp, brittle, a sound I didn't recognize. "I've been in this company since I could walk. I know you know the operations," Carla interrupted, her voice cracked slightly. Guilt, maybe, or just the effort of forcing the words out. "But we're proposing an interim arrangement. Ronan is acting CEO with you in a special advisory role. Strategic counsel, full compensation. It's what the PR firm recommended. Please, don't make me say it twice. You mean, someone who isn't me?" Ronan leaned forward, the snake finally shedding its skin. "The board has voted. Effective immediately. You're being transitioned out of your role. We'll provide a generous severance package." Of course, he slid a folder across the table like he was offering me a menu on top a sympathy card. "Thinking of you during this difficult time," still sealed underneath the severance papers. 6-month salary. A grief leave suggestion. A line about transitioning with dignity. Meanwhile, my company email stopped working in real time. I watched the notification pop up on my laptop. "Your credentials have been disabled. Contact it." Someone had literally pressed a button to delete me mid-sentence. The words hit like physical blows. Around the table, 8 faces, People who'd eaten at our family table, who'd celebrated holidays with us, who'd watched me grow up, avoided my gaze like cowards. Only Ronan looked at me directly, and in his eyes, I saw the truth. This had been planned long before Dad's body was cold. HR appeared at the door with a cardboard box. Not even a proper file box. A printer paper box with my name sharpied on the side, like I was a seasonal intern being let go after Christmas rush. "We'll mail any personal items that require review," the HR rep said, not meeting my eyes. "Need security to escort me out?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "It's protocol, kiddo. For the company's protection." There it was again, kiddo. 2 guards appeared like they'd been waiting for their cue. Probably had been. As I gathered my things with deliberate calm, I slipped Dad's pen into my pocket. They wouldn't get that too. I looked each board member in the eye before I left, memorizing their faces. "You're making a mistake." Ronan's smirk widened. "Don't make this harder than this isn't over." I didn't argue further. I just started collecting signatures that night. The guards flanked me as I walked through the building Dad built from nothing. Past employees watching in shocked silence as the founder's son got marched out like a common criminal. They thought they'd broken me. They thought they'd stolen my birthright with a simple vote and a security escort. They didn't know I'd been keeping receipts since the day Dad died. The first thing I did after being escorted out was drive to Dad's grave. Sat in my car with the engine running, staring at the fresh headstone while my hands shook with barely contained rage. Then, I made myself breathe. Think. Dad always said emotion was data, but strategy required a cool head. You can't play chess while your brain's on fire. I didn't hire some investigator to dig around. Didn't need to. I had something better. People inside Morgan Biotech who actually cared about what the company was supposed to stand for. That same night, I got a call from Nico, one of our IT administrators. Kid had been with the company 6 years. Started as an intern while he was finishing his computer science degree. Dad had personally approved his last 2 promotions. "I saw what happened today," Nico said, his voice tight with anger. "It's wrong. Everyone's talking about it. And I think you should see some things I found while doing routine server maintenance. Things that weren't supposed to be there." What he showed me over a laptop at a 24-hour diner made my blood run cold. Nico opened a shared drive folder labeled Transition Plan. Inside another folder, Post-AGM Leadership Realignment. The creation date was 6 weeks before Dad died. Then the emails, 8 months of them. They'd been planning this coup while Dad was still alive. While they smiled at him across the conference table and toasted his health at company parties. One line stopped me cold. Carla writing to Mitchell, "Once he's out of the picture, move quickly to sideline the son before he can rally support." Out of the picture. They'd written that while Dad was still breathing. My hands clenched around my laptop so hard the plastic case creaked in protest. The emails revealed their endgame. Sell off the company's core research division to Apex Pharmaceuticals, our biggest competitor. The patents Dad spent 20 years developing. The formulas that could save millions of lives, all packaged and sold for a quick profit. Golden parachutes for the board, pink slips for everyone else, and the paper trail on their individual side hustles was ugly. Kickbacks, stock manipulation, conflicts of interest. Each of them had their hand in a different cookie jar. Warren was the only exception. Ronan had leverage on him. The guy wasn't greedy. He was trapped. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a coordinated gutting. But the document that changed everything was buried in a legal folder. Our corporate bylaws. Last amended 15 years ago when the company went public. I'd read them before, of course. But never with this kind of desperate attention. Section 47 billions, subsection 3. In the event of contested control, any shareholder or coalition of shareholders holding 75% or more of outstanding shares may call an extraordinary meeting and reverse any board decision, including but not limited to personnel changes with immediate effect. 75%. I pulled up our shareholder registry. The board collectively controlled 31%. Various institutional investors held another 40%. The remaining 29% was scattered among employees, early investors, and small funds. Dad's estate, my inheritance, included 22% of the company. I needed another 53%. Over half the company, acquired quietly without anyone noticing until it was too late. Impossible maybe. But I had something the board didn't expect. The truth about what they were planning. And more importantly, I had relationships with people who actually cared about Morgan Biotech's mission. People who remembered what Dad stood for. My apartment became a war room. Whiteboards covered every wall, mapping out shareholders, their connections, their motivations, their price points. I color-coded them. Green for confirmed allies. Yellow for possibles who might swing either way. Red for those too deep in the board's pocket to ever flip. The reds were depressingly numerous at first, but that just meant there was nowhere to go but up. 8 weeks until the annual shareholder meeting. I collected proxies like Pokemon cards, coffee shops, gym parking lots, kids' soccer games. Anywhere I could accidentally run into shareholders who remembered what Dad stood for. Nico's evidence folder did the heavy lifting. One look at the Apex emails, and most of them signed on the spot. Employee RSS, pension funds, family trusts. Each percentage point was a victory recorded in green marker on my war room walls. Then I made my first mistake. Nico had been feeding me updates via text. Quick hits about board movements, internal memos, shareholder communications. I got sloppy. Texted him back something dumb. Keep digging on the Apex files. Need the kickback numbers. 2 days later, Nico called me from a payphone. His voice was tight with controlled panic. It flagged our text chain during a routine audit. Ronan demanded to know why I was communicating with you outside company channels. My stomach dropped. What did you tell them? That you texted asking about your 401k rollover? And I responded out of habit. They bought it barely. He paused. But I'm burned as a source. They're watching me now. I can't access the restricted servers anymore without raising flags. I'd almost blown my best inside asset because I couldn't keep my thumbs off a phone. Stupid. Careless. The kind of mistake that gets you caught. Nico's cover story held, but the lesson was learned. No more digital trails. The real breakthrough came 3 weeks in. Leora, portfolio manager at Northstar Investments, called me directly. Northstar held 7% of Morgan Biotech. Serious institutional money. Mr. Morgan, I've been watching some interesting movement in your company shares. Small lots being accumulated through various channels. Your handiwork, I presume. My heart stopped. If she'd noticed, others might too. I'm also aware, she continued, that your stepfather has been making promises to my competitors. Sweetheart deals that specifically exclude Northstar. She paused, and I could hear the cold smile in her voice. I despise being taken for granted. Northstar's 7% is yours. One condition. When you retake control, you implement your father's 5-year strategic plan. The one the current board dismissed. Dad's last vision. Expanding into personalized medicine, opening clinics in underserved communities. That's what they'd killed to make room for their scheme. Done. The board wasn't sitting idle. Same sedan parked outside my building at different hours. They were getting nervous. I kept collecting signatures. After 6 weeks of grinding, I had 51% committed. Close. Tantalizingly close, but not enough. I needed that 75% threshold to be untouchable. That's when I played my first offensive move. I incorporated Prometheus Biosystems, registered it in Delaware with minimal fanfare, just another startup in a sea of biotech hopefuls. Then I made very sure word reached the right ears. A casual mention at a biotech conference. A LinkedIn update about exciting new ventures in immunotherapy application. Within days, rumors tore through Morgan Biotech's halls like wildfire. The founder's son starting a competing company trying to poach researchers. Planning revenge. The board took the bait beautifully. 10 days emergency meetings were called. Ronan sent a company-wide email demanding all employees sign supplemental non-compete agreements within 48 hours. The paranoia was delicious. Then, Ronan slipped. He sent an internal memo to all department heads. Reminder, do not discuss ongoing Apex negotiations with anyone outside the board. This includes the former COO. Employees started forwarding it to each other with confused messages attached. Wait, what Apex negotiations? Why would he mention that? The board hadn't publicly acknowledged any Apex discussions. Ronan had just accidentally confirmed the rumor he was supposed to be denying. I fed the paranoia carefully, scheduled very public lunches with key Morgan Biotech researchers, not to recruit them, but to be seen doing it. Ronan called me directly, trying to sound paternal. This vendetta helps no one, kiddo. Stop trying to steal our IP, and we can discuss a more generous severance. Interesting. I hadn't mentioned anything about IP. Hadn't even hinted at recruiting anyone for real work. But Ronan was so deep in his own guilt, he was answering questions I hadn't asked. I appreciate the concern, Ronan. I'm happy where I am. 7 days, the psychological warfare intensified. Each rumor was crafted to be plausible but unprovable. Smoke without fire. Meanwhile, the real damage was happening in the market. Morgan Biotech stock price continued its descent, down 15% over 3 weeks. Most of what I accumulated wasn't purchased outright. It was voting control through irrevocable proxy agreements. Shareholders who wouldn't sell were happy to sign over votes once they saw the Apex emails. My actual purchases were modest, spread across 6 brokers, timed under 13D thresholds, masked by the sell-off volume. My attorney securities team ran everything clean. My count grew to 71%, then 74%. Then it stalled 5 days. I needed 75% minimum. I was stuck at 74.6%. The remaining uncommitted shares were scattered among small holders who either couldn't be reached or didn't care enough to get involved. Then everything almost fell apart. The transfer agent handling verification flagged 3 of my proxy agreements for additional review. Something about signature discrepancies. My attorney called me at 2 a.m., voice tight. If they reject these, you're at 71.2%. Below threshold, and their review committee doesn't meet until next Tuesday. I didn't sleep. My legal team worked the phones, escalating to the transfer agent's legal department. Turned out one board member's cousin worked there. Coincidence? I stopped believing in those weeks ago. At 4 p.m. the next day, my attorney called back. Cleared all 3. Their legal team reviewed the flagging criteria and found it was applied incorrectly. She paused. Someone tried to sandbag us from the inside. They failed. 74.6%. Still short, but still in the game. Then the board struck back. 4 days. The hit piece dropped at 6 a.m. A business outlet ran the headline. Troubled Morgan's secret struggles. Sources detail pattern of instability. Anonymous sources painted a picture of a man spiraling. Erratic behavior. Grief-induced breakdowns. Whispers of substance issues never substantiated but expertly implied. The article mentioned I'd been let go from my position, framing my ouster as a compassionate intervention rather than a coup. But one line made my vision go red. A concerned former colleague claimed there had been troubling incidents with female staff members, and that some employees were afraid he might show up at the building unannounced. No specifics, no names. Just enough to make people wonder. Just enough to poison any Google search of my name for the next decade. My phone exploded. Worried allies calling to check in. Nervous shareholders suddenly having second thoughts. Leora's assistant called to say she was reviewing the situation. I sat in my apartment watching weeks of work potentially unravel, because someone planted a story and let it spread like poison. That's when Gideon called. Gideon, Dad's first CFO and longest-serving board member until he retired 5 years ago. I've been watching this circus from my place up north, he said, his voice growly with age. Thought I was done with corporate warfare. Then I saw that garbage article this morning. That line about troubling incidents. I know what they're doing. I've seen this playbook before. Gideon, I didn't know you still followed the company. Your father built something worth following. And I keep very good records. He paused. Ronan's been sloppy. That Cayman account he uses. Not as untraceable as he thinks. And I have a banker's box in my study that your father asked me to keep just in case. I'm flying down tomorrow, Gideon continued. Bringing some materials that might interest you. And my own 1.2% that I never sold. 74.6 plus 1.2 equals 75.8. 8. I had my threshold. Gideon arrived the next morning carrying a box that looked innocuous enough. Inside were documents that made my previous intelligence look like grocery lists. Financial records showing Ronan had been skimming from R&D budgets for years, funneling money through contractors that existed only on paper. Email threads between board members discussing how to manipulate stock prices around FDA announcements. Most damning. A recorded conversation from 2 years ago, where Ronan explicitly discussed waiting for James to step aside one way or another. He wore a wire. Your father was many things. Gideon settled onto my couch. Naive wasn't one of them. After Ronan married your mother, James started documenting everything quietly. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure you got these. I spent the next day with my attorney reviewing every document. We had enough to trigger a federal investigation. The SEC filing revealing my stake would hit Edgar tomorrow. But Gideon pulled out one more folder. His face had changed harder somehow, reluctant. There's something else. Something your father hoped you'd never have to see. He handed me a stack of wire transfer record. Dates going back 5 years. Payments from shell companies I didn't recognize flowing into an account in the British Virgin Islands. Whose account? I asked, though something in my gut already knew. Your mother's? I stared at the numbers. Millions of dollars. Payments that started 3 months after she married Ronan. I don't understand. Your father didn't either. Not until the end. Gideon's voice was heavy. He thought Ronan was the architect. Spent 2 years documenting Ronan's moves, building a case. Then 6 months before he died, he found these. He tapped the wire transfers. The trail doesn't lead to Ronan. It leads through him. Your mother recruited Ronan at a charity gala 7 years ago. She identified him as someone ambitious enough to execute but vain enough to take the fall. Every major decision in this coup, the timing, the Apex deal, the offshore structure, it all traces back to instructions she gave through encrypted channels. The room tilted. She divorced Dad to marry the weapon she'd built. Gideon nodded slowly. Your father confronted her 3 days before he died. She told him he'd chosen the company over his family for 30 years. Said she'd spent 3 decades being second place to a building full of centrifuges. She wanted what she was owed. That's when my mother called. Her voice came through the speaker like honey over broken glass. Soft, trembling. Exactly the way you'd expect a grieving widow to sound. Sweetheart, I just saw that horrible article. I'm so sorry. I had no idea Ronan was capable of something like this. A sniffle. Perfectly timed. I feel so used. He told me the company needed steady leadership after your father passed. I believed him. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly. I let the silence stretch. Let her fill it. You know I've always been on your side. I'm your mother. I only want what's best for you. Her voice cracked. Maybe we could meet. Talk about how to fix this together. As a family. Classic textbook manipulation. Position yourself as the victim. Create an alliance against the common enemy. It might have worked if I hadn't just finished reading Gideon's files. That's interesting, Mom. I kept my voice flat. Because I'm looking at an email from 8 months ago where you outline the exact timeline for transitioning leadership away from emotional attachments. Your words sent from an encrypted account you thought nobody could trace. The silence on her end was deafening. What did you? The honey evaporated from her voice mid-syllable. What replaced it was something colder, something I'd never heard before. Where did you get that? Dad kept records. She laughed. Actually laughed. But it wasn't her public laugh. The warm, tinkling one she used at charity events. This was different, low and controlled. You're bluffing. You don't have anything substantial. The BVI accounts say otherwise. Another silence. Then be very careful, sweetheart. Her voice had dropped the maternal act entirely now. You're playing a game you don't understand. I understand. Fine. We'll see about that. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time. My mother. The woman who'd sung me lullabies, who'd bandaged my scraped knees, who'd apparently been planning corporate patricide while Dad was still alive. I'd been recording the whole call. 48 hours until the shareholder meeting, the board made their final mistake. They moved up the Apex acquisition timeline, scheduling a special shareholder meeting in just 2 days to approve the strategic partnership. What they didn't know was that Apex's promised support included several funds that had already secretly pledged their shares to me. They thought they were getting a compliant target company. Instead, they were walking into an ambush. I let the announcement stand for exactly 24 hours, long enough for the media to pick it up, for real shareholders to understand what was at stake. Then I called Leora. It's time. Finally, I could hear her smile through the phone. I was starting to think you enjoyed the theater too much. The next morning, business journalists received an anonymous package containing select excerpts from the board's internal emails. Nothing legally actionable yet, but enough to raise serious questions about conflicts of interest. The stock price tumbled another 5% by lunch. Meanwhile, I filed the formal paperwork with the SEC, revealing my 75.8% stake for the first time. Between Gideon's shares and the final quiet buys, I'd barely cleared the threshold. The 13D hit Edgar at 3:47 p.m., 13 minutes before market close. Bloomberg terminals lit up. Reporters pounced. The headlines were instantaneous. Morgan Air discloses majority stake. Proxy battle erupts at biotech firm. My phone exploded. Reporters wanting statements. Board members making desperate attempts to negotiate. My mother. I ignored them all except one. Hello, Ronan. Silence on his end stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. You clever little brat. He finally breathed. You got sloppy. Market opens in 22 minutes. My driver dropped me at the Morgan Biotech building. Media circus already forming. News vans, photographers, business reporters with hungry expression. It's like a movie premiere, he said. It's a proxy fight. I stepped out. Cameras swung toward me. Reporters shouted questions. I walked past them without a word. Shoes clicking on the pavement with metronomic precision. The security guard at the desk, Jerome, who'd been there 15 years, looked up as I approached. His face went through several expressions before settling on something like relief. Mr. Morgan. He said it quietly. Like a secret. Welcome back. I'm back. The elevator ride to the boardroom floor felt both endless and too quick. Each floor was a memory. The lab where I'd learned to use a microscope at 7 years old. The break room where Dad and I ate lunch together. At exactly 9:29, I turned to my attorney. Whatever you hear, don't come in. This needs to be between me and them. I smoothed my suit one last time. Deep blue, Dad's favorite color, gripped my briefcase containing the proxies that represented 75.8% of Morgan Biotech, and checked my phone. 9:30 a.m. market opens. I pushed open the boardroom door. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. 8 pairs of eyes turned to me, some nervous, some defiant, all recognizing that their carefully constructed coup was about to face its final reckoning. And in the corner seat where she had no official reason to be, sat my mother, Celeste. Good morning. Ronan's face went from red to white to red again. You have no right to be here. Security. 2 guards appeared at the door. They looked at Ronan, then at me, then at each other. Nobody moved. On paper, Ronan was still chairman. But everyone in that building had seen the headlines this morning. Gentlemen. My attorney stepped in behind me, wheeling boxes of documentation. Perhaps we can resolve the question of authority before anyone makes a career-ending decision. She handed the senior guard a single sheet of paper. SECC filing confirmation. 75.8% ownership. Verified and time-stamped. The guard read it twice. Then he stepped aside. Ronan tried one last gambit. Those proxy agreements are invalid. We're challenging the transfers. This meeting is tabled until legal can review. My counsel didn't even blink. She pulled out a folder. The proxy agreements were verified by 3 independent transfer agents yesterday. Here are the confirmations time-stamped, notarized, and already filed with the SEC. She set it on the table. Would you like to continue, or should I call the securities attorneys waiting in the lobby? The bluff collapsed. Ronan's face went gray. I didn't answer. I opened my briefcase. I'm here as the majority shareholder of Morgan Biotech Solution, 75.8%. Mitchell shot to his feet. That's impossible. We've been tracking every trade. You tracked what I wanted you to track. I pulled out the stack of proxy agreements. While you were chasing Prometheus Bios, I was collecting votes. Carla's face had gone ashen. Those shell companies, the Delaware LLC, all legal. Unlike coordinating stock manipulation through Cayman Island accounts or taking kickbacks from Apex, Ronan slammed his hand on the table. You're bluffing. Gideon says, hello. I watched the blood drain from Ronan's face. He kept good records. I pulled out Ronan's private agreement with Apex, then Carla's, then Mitchell's. Each one came with its own document. I laid them out like tarot cards predicting their doom. This is corporate blackmail, someone sputtered. Blackmail would be threatening to release this unless you complied. I checked my watch. The SEC receives these documents at 10:31 a.m., 1 hour. Counsel is handling the filing. The only question is whether you'll still be board members when they do. My attorney stepped forward. For the record, I'm filing notice of an extraordinary shareholder meeting pursuant to Section 47B of the corporate bylaws. The proxy firm has verified all proxy cards. As Mr. Morgan controls more than 75% of outstanding shares, he has the authority to reverse any and all board decisions effective immediately, including your decision to remove me as CEO. The board members looked at each other like trapped animals. Ronan's face transformed into something ugly and desperate. You think you've won? Apex has contracts ready. You'll destroy billions in value with this tantrum. Whose value? Yours? The $30 million you were promised for delivering our patent portfolio. I slid his personal agreement across the table. Carla's $15 million. Mitchell's 20th. Enough theatrics. Carla tried desperately to rally. Even with 75.8%, you need board approval. Actually, You don't because you're all fired. Effective immediately. You can't. Section 52C. In cases of demonstrated breach of fiduciary duty, the majority shareholder may remove board members without cause or notice. I gestured to my attorney's boxes. Would you like to discuss what constitutes demonstrated? The room fell silent. Just the hum of air conditioning, and someone's labored breathing. Resign now, quietly. And I'll consider not pursuing personal lawsuits. The criminal investigation will proceed. That's out of my hands, but you'll avoid civil litigation. This is a coup. Ronan spat. No. What you did 3 months ago was a coup. You don't get to keep it. One by one, they broke. Mitchell was first. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself, just asked quietly. Will resigning keep my name out of the court filings? Depends on how much you cooperate. He signed without another word and headed for the door. His badge beeped red. Your access has been revoked, my counsel said without looking up. Security will escort you. Carla followed. She paused at the table, opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. Some approximation of an apology without actually using the word, sorry. She couldn't find the words, just shook her head and signed. Warren was next. He stopped beside me and whispered barely audible. Ronan has something on me. He didn't explain what. Didn't need to. I know, I said. Cooperate with the SEC, and we'll see what can be done. The others filed past until only Ronan remained. He tried to slip his laptop into his bag. Sir, Jerome had appeared at the door. Quiet and professional. You'll need to leave that. Ronan's face contorted. That's my personal company property. Legal will coordinate return of personal items after review. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. 3 months ago, they'd had me marched out with a Sharpied box. Now they filed past me, heads down, as security waited to escort them from the building they tried to steal. Ronan was last. He stopped at the door, turning back with pure hatred burning in his eyes. This isn't over. Yes, it is. The door closed. The room was empty except for my attorney, still organizing documents. And my mother, still sitting in the corner, still watching, still silent. Everyone out, I said quietly. My attorney glanced between us, read the room, and left without a word. Mom didn't move, didn't stand, just looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not fear, not guilt, calculation. Like she was running numbers on how this would play out. The BVI accounts. I said the encrypted instructions to Ronan. The recruitment at the charity gala 7 years ago. Her face didn't change. Your father told you. Dad documented everything. Gideon had the files. She laughed. Actually laughed. Of course he did. James never could let anything go undocumented. She stood finally smoothing her skirt like we were discussing lunch plan. 32 years I gave that man. I gave 32 years of being second to this company. Every missed anniversary. Every vacation cut short. Every time he chose a lab result over his own family, so you decided to take it from him. I decided to take what I earned. Her eyes were ice. You have no idea what it's like to be invisible in your own marriage. To watch your husband love a building more than he loves you. He built something that saves lives. He built something that consumed his and mine and almost yours. She stepped closer. I did you a favor. You were becoming him. Another Morgan man married to microscopes and spreadsheets. I pulled out the last folder, the wire transfers, her signature on the shell company documents. Enough for a federal conspiracy charge. The SEC gets these in an hour along with everything else. For the first time something flickered behind her eyes. You'd send your own mother to prison. You'd steal your own son's birthright. We stood there 2 feet apart. 34 years of family dissolving between us. I'm not going to prison. She said it like a fact. I have documentation too. Insurance policies Ronan doesn't know about. If I go down, everyone goes down. The whole board. Half of Apex's leadership. It'll take years to untangle and cost the company billions in legal fees. You're bluffing. She smiled. The same smile she'd given at my graduation, at my promotion ceremony, at Dad's funeral. I'm your mother. I taught you everything you know about strategy. She picked up her purse, but not everything I know. She walked to the door, stopped with her hand on the frame. You're more like me than you want to admit. The patience, the planning, playing the long game while everyone else panics. She looked back one last time. Your father would be proud and terrified. Then she was gone. I stood alone in the boardroom where they'd tried to destroy me. The same room where Dad had announced our first patent, where I'd been promoted, where I'd been fired. My attorney appeared at the door. The SEC filing is ready. Do you want to include the additional materials? I looked at the folder in my hands. Mom's insurance files were probably real. Releasing everything would trigger years of legal warfare. Collateral damage across the industry. Exactly the chaos she was counting on. Hold the BVI documents for now. File everything else, not mercy. Containment. If I dropped everything at once, she'd get what she wanted. Chaos, big enough to hide inside. She thought her insurance policy made her untouchable. But I didn't need a headline. I needed a file that closed like a bear trap. Slowly, quietly, with no room to escape. My attorney nodded and disappeared. Within the hour, I'd made 3 calls. Her credit cards, the ones tied to accounts she thought were hidden, started declining. Not frozen by me directly, just flagged for review. The kind of review that takes months. Her usual lunch spots, the charity committees, the social calendar that defined her identity. Those calls would stop being returned soon enough. Not because I threatened anyone, because people can smell liability like smoke. By the time the forensic accountant finished his work, she'd be isolated. No allies, no leverage, no audience for whatever desperate play she had left. Dad taught me chess. Mom taught me patience. Neither of them taught me that sometimes the winning move is making sure your opponent runs out of pieces before they realize the game changed. 3 weeks after retaking control, Mom showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant tried to stop her, but she swept past like she still owned the building. Maybe in her mind she did. We need to talk. She settled into the chair across from my desk, without being invited. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup slightly smudged. She looked diminished somehow. Smaller than I'd ever seen her. Ronan left me. Her voice cracked on the words. Disappeared to Costa Rica with the accounts I thought were protected. I have nothing. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. The gesture seemed practiced, but her hand was trembling. I know I made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But I'm still your mother. I need help. Just enough to start over somewhere quiet. She looked up at me with wet eyes. Please. You're all I have left. For just a moment, one dangerous moment, I almost believed her. Then I noticed her purse was positioned toward my desk at an odd angle. The clasp was open and I could see the faint red glow of a recording indicator inside. That's quite the performance, I said quietly. Were you hoping to get me on tape agreeing to help you flee prosecution? Or just trying to gather evidence for a custody of assets claim? Her face went through a transformation so fast it was almost supernatural. The tears stopped instantly. The trembling disappeared. What replaced it was something reptilian. Cold intelligence assessing a failed strategy. You've gotten paranoid, she said flatly. I got careful. I leaned back in my chair. The forensic accountant traced your accounts last week. Your BVI accounts were never really hidden. You just couldn't see who else had access. Her face went pale. Ronan didn't steal your money, Mom. The accounts were frozen by the DOJ 3 days ago. You would have known that if you'd tried to access them instead of coming here. She stood abruptly. The mask fully off now. You little, the U.S. Attorney's Office will be contacting you within 48 hours. I'd recommend having counsel present. I pressed the intercom rest. Security. My mother is leaving now. She stared at me with something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Genuine fear. You planned this, she whispered. The whole thing. You let me think I still had leverage. You taught me to play chess, Mom. I met her gaze without flinching. You forgot Dad taught me to see 3 moves ahead. Jerome appeared at the door with 2 guards. She gathered her purse, the recording device inside now useless, and walked toward the exit. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. I raised you, she said. I made you. No. I picked up Dad's pen and returned to my paperwork. Dad made me. You just showed me what I never wanted to become. The door closed behind her. I didn't watch her go. As the door closed behind them, I sank into Dad's chair. My chair now. First thing I did, canceled the Apex meeting, reinstated the R&D budget, sent a company-wide memo that layoffs were off the table. Somewhere out there, Ronan was discovering that Costa Rica has an extradition treaty with the United States. And my mother was learning what it felt like to be invisible. Not to a husband who loved his work, but to a world that had finally seen what she really was. The forensic accountant would need a few more months to complete the full file. By then, the DOJ would have everything they needed.